Hello everyone, my name is Alif, and today my group and I, Claudia and Yana, will be doing a presentation on the challenges of a marriage counselor. To be more specific, the challenges and issues facing marriage counselors as a career. So let's just jump right into it. Let's begin with the introduction. What's a marriage counselor? What do they do exactly? Now, when you're in a relationship, things don't always go to plan. Things don't always go to the way you want. There are conflicts which occur, and when you're in a relationship, sometimes communication stops. There's feelings of doubt, mistrust, and hurt which can settle on both spouses. Now, this may be the time to reach out to a marriage counselor. A certified marriage counselor's job is to guide a couple in determining what the real issues are, how to better solve differences, and how to judge whether the marriage can be saved. A marriage counselor sees both individuals and married couples. For example, in a situation like this, sometimes a woman will seek counseling on her own because her husband refuses to attend meetings or she wants advice about him without him hearing the conversations. And there's also times when a couple concludes together that the marriage is not working, which leads them to attend sessions together in order to better understand what led them to discord. When a couple comes to counseling together, it is the marriage counselor's job to decipher what really is going on behind the complaints, to help to mediate discussions and get the couple to agree on rules and boundaries in order to get the marriage back on track. Now, a marriage counselor is not a psychiatrist, and they can't diagnose and treat mental illnesses that play havoc on a marriage. However, the counselor can make suggestions about what underlying issues such as drugs, drug abuse, childhood experiences, or depression he sees that might be contributing to the couple's troubles. The counselor is then responsible for referring the person to the appropriate medical doctor if necessary. Once treatment is started, the marriage counseling still can continue with discussions about what needs to be done to mend the marriage.
Good afternoon, Doctor. I'm Claudia. I'll be presenting the ethics of codes, the family and marriage law, and then the development of the codes, and then the reasons why we create the codes. And then I'll be explaining a bit about these differences between the Eastern and Western marriage culture. So in the West, marriage tend to be based on the individual's notions of love or romance. So basically, individuals have their freedom to make their own decisions in their relationship, whereas the Asian country, their culture, they prioritize their family and community first. So arranged marriage in Asian country, it's really common and popular, but the Western culture, it's not really popular in arranged marriage. So during this ongoing pandemic time, there is a lot of us staying at home, and then this pandemic has brought us changes in social behavior. It has affected adults, affected us living alone, our mindset on living alone, or whether those who opted never married, separated, or maybe divorced. So coming to this marriage and divorce law that did not require any formalities, there was transactions between the groom and the bride's family. Both marriage and divorce are major categories of the family law. A knowledge of states law is particularly critical in this area, as all states has passed laws regulating the formations and dissolutions of recognized unions. So there is no legal rule prevented the husband from freely repudiating their wife, but before availing himself of that freedom, he might as well consider themselves and danger in his standing with the community, and whether he might not find himself confronted with the unpleasant choice between the wife's siblings. Next, which is the codes of ethics. Ethics are suggested standards of conduct based on a consensus value sets. So ethical standards are generally formalized in terms of codes of ethics. As the group emerged in this development towards professionalism, it requires formulations of codes of ethics for safe practice of these professions. So professional bodies or organizations of counseling have developed ethical standards which they have made available to the practitioners or counselors. Professional organizations for practice, counseling, and psychotherapy are these three below, which is APA, BAC, and ACA. So next will be the development of the codes. So there are three codes which I mentioned just now: APA codes, BAC codes, and ACA codes. So normally we use APA codes and ACA codes. So there are two codes of ethics guide which the counselor or the psychologist can practice in counseling sessions. The first one will be general codes of ethics. And then the second one will be the specialty guidelines for the delivery of service by counselings and psychologists. So the American psychologist Donald Super has approved this ACA code in 1961. The classification of this misbehavior, or does it attach to the penalties to the violation for the standard? So they focus on these guidelines for counselors or therapies in this fundamental rule, which they have to respect and protect their clients at all times, and then can be done by the counselor who manifests honesty, integrity, and objectivity in their behavior towards their clients. So unethical behavior usually occurs when the counselor communicates in a way that establish one set of expectation and that behave in a way that is inconsistent with those expectations. Okay, so for example, the counselor structures of the counseling situation verbally or non-verbally to imply mutual trust, consent, and confidentiality. So the counselor have to behave in a way that upset this expectation because the counselor assign greater value to one another. The reasons of having this ethic codes is to help professionalize and protect and associations by the government and to promote the stability within the professions. And then is to help to control the internal disagreement between the clients and the practitioners. So in order to protect the practitioners from the public and the client from incompetent counselor, especially in the malpractice issues. So client can also use codes to evaluate questionable treatments from the counselor. That's all for my part. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I'll pass it to the next person.
Right, so this is the second part, or part B of the presentation. And for this part, we'll be talking a little bit more about the codes of ethics of healthcare professionals or marriage counselor. So we'll be discussing a little bit more on the codes that are commonly breached and the impact of breaching those codes on the practitioner or organization. So let's begin with the code of ethics of marriage counselor. So experts in mental health are those who specialize in diagnosing and treating patients who suffer from mental illnesses. These health practitioners have a history in education and are licensed in the field of mental health training. As for marriage counselor, it's one of those professionals who communicate and understand issues that couples might have in a marriage. And this can be done through various kinds of therapy, methods of communication in order to strengthen the bond of the clients. Marriage counseling gives partners how to collaborate more effectively, negotiate conflicts, problem solving, and even argue in a healthier manner. Now, marriage and family therapists are accredited therapists who offer marriage therapy. These therapists provide the same mental well-being resources as most therapists, but with an emphasis on couples partnerships or family relationships. So being a marriage counselor or any other health professionals, it's crucial to ensure that the client's information of any kind is to be kept secured and confidential. Although it's one of the most violated code of ethics, whether it would be intentionally or unintentionally, surprisingly. So we're going to go through some of the list that will be discussed here, and some of the codes of ethics that are commonly breached or violated made by the health professionals or organizations. So the first one is responsibility to clients. Now, professionals such as marriage counselors may obtain the appropriate written consent for counseling or similar treatments and communicate with clients in language that is reasonably clear to them. Where the client is constitutionally incapable of giving informed consent due to age or mental state, marriage and family practitioners receive informed consent from a legally approved person, whether any alternative consent is legally acceptable. Though it's one of the most important code of ethics for professionals and counselors, the informed consent is surprisingly one of the most common error made, usually breached or violated intentionally or unintentionally. While it is true that it's solely the responsibility of the counselors to ensure the information are kept secure, the information can often be discussed openly without realizing. Now, this is obviously a personal error that can be made by the counselor. Even if the information that were opened are minor, it would still be considered as a violation, as in the Code of Ethics under the AAMFT, the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. End quote. The content of informed consent may vary depending upon the client and treatment plan. However, informed consent generally necessitates that client has been adequately informed of significant information concerning treatment processes and procedures. The client has freely and without undue influence expressed consent and provided consent that is appropriately documented. Now, moving on to the second part, which is confidentiality. Now, disclosing the limits of confidentiality is imperative. Counselors should disclose to clients and other interested parties at the outset of services the nature of confidentiality and possible limitations of the client's rights to confidentiality. Thus, counselors discuss with clients the conditions in which confidential information can be requested and in which confidential information would be lawfully obliged to be disclosed. Now, ensuring the confidential information are being kept thoroughly secured is one of the most important tasks for counselors, though this is one of the commonly violated code ethics error made by professionals. Counselors should not reveal the client confidences until the client has given written permission or waives their right to do so, or unless required or allowed by decree. Now, except in emergency cases and were forbidden by statute, a verbal permission will not suffice. This is the most common honest mistake made by counselors. Verbal would be permissible, but according to the Code of Ethics, AAMFT, it's important that clients to provide written confidentiality on paper, and any other methods such as verbal would not be acceptable. Hence, as counselors, ensuring the confidential information have been agreed upon by the clients are written clearly on a paper, which can be used as proof in case of legal issue in order to protect both parties, the clients and the counselor. Now we're going to take a look at this case study, which involves an alleged breach of confidentiality. Now in this case study, we're going to be discussing whether or not the counselor is in the wrong or not. And we're also going to be discussing about the resolutions and some risk management recommendations that can be done for future references. So let's get right into it. So in this case study, it involves this counselor. So this counselor began seeing a family, a mother and her two sons, for family counseling. The primary focus of the counseling sessions related to the boys' anger management and antisocial behavior at school and at home. It was apparent that the children's anger management and behavioral issues were attributed to their mother's stress about the father's work schedule, alcoholism, and domineering personality. Now, the counselor attempted to advise the couple on parenting techniques while working with the children on following rules and obeying authority figures. although the father only attended one session during the 6 months period. The family abruptly stopped attending the counseling sessions, despite the counselor's efforts to contact the mother and father. After many unsuccessful attempts to contact the mother and father, the counselor closed the family's file. Now, fast forward 6 months after the file was closed, the counselor received a phone call from the mother, wherein she discussed her desire to divorce her husband. She described that the husband as an alcoholic, an excessive spender, and being abusive to their sons, both verbally and physically. The counselor agreed to be the mediator during the next counseling session, where the wife would serve divorce papers to her husband. Now, approximately 1 week after the husband was given divorce papers, the couple attended a counseling session. On this session, where the husband appeared intoxicated, and acknowledged the need to break away from his demeaning ways and be more involved with his sons' lives. The couple had a significant fight in the counselor's office, and the husband stated he was going to make his wife suffer for a very long time. The wife and children continued to attend weekly sessions after the next 6 months, until they began abruptly stop counseling sessions. The only other contact the counselor had with the husband was twice via phone about this failure to pay the counselor's fees. Now, on the request made by the wife, the counselor agreed and composed a lengthy letter to the judge detailing the husband's appearance of intoxication, abusive statements, threatening behavior during the counseling sessions. In the letter, the counselor recommended limiting the visitation rights of the husband with the children due to his abusive, violent behavior. This disclosure provides the basis for the husband's claim of breaching his confidentiality afforded to him under the state mental health confidentiality statute. Let's discuss the resolution for the case study. Now, defense counsel recommended that this claim to be settled due to the violation of plaintiff's privacy. It was defense counsel's assessment that there will likely be a plaintiff's verdict of approximately 90% based in large part upon the clear privacy breach by the counselor to the judge. Now, although the letter from the counselor to the judge states that the wife and children were his past clients, it is clear that the husband also attended counseling sessions. Hence, the husband is also covered under confidentiality protection. Although the counselor received appropriate consent from the wife verbally over a phone to disclose information gained in therapy to the judge, the counselor received no consent from the husband. Therefore, the husband claimed that as a result of the violation of his statutory privacy rights, he suffered public embarrassment or negligent or intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation of his good name and character, and invasion of his privacy. So now we're going to be talking about the risk management recommendation for cases like this and for future references. One of the first things to do is to obtain the client's written and dated authorization for the release of information. The two named parties, for example, those with whom the counselor may communicate about treatment-related matters or share client documentation. Renew such authorizations at least annually and more often if warranted. The second thing to do would be to conduct a discussion with the client regarding information that may not be protected from release, including the relating to child endangerment, neglect, abuse, danger to self or others, and court-ordered release of information. Obtain signed statements that the client understands these exceptions to privacy and confidentiality protections. And finally, to always consider what information to share, when to share it, and how to share it. For example, written versus spoken, in person versus telephone or email, and with whom it will be shared in order to do to both communicate effectively and protect the client's privacy.
Hi, my name is Yana and I'll be presenting Section C. I'll be talking more in depth about the commonly breached codes, the reasons, and the statistics. For this section, we'll be using one main source, which is that has 28 states in America from 2009 to 2013 as their sample, and also the AAMFT, American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, as the guidelines. The first category is responsibility to clients, subbed under establishing dual relationships in the counseling career. It can't be violated because under the AAMFT Codes of Ethics Standard 1, dual relationships, also known as multiple relationships, states that relationships between the professional and the client is to be avoided. It includes but not limited to business relationships or close personal relationships with the client directly or with the client's immediate family. The reason it can't be violated is because these relationships can lead to the professional's impaired or influenced judgments towards any decision making or interpretations or assessments, or the exploitation of said clients, which violates the client's trust and dependency. How it's violated, as stated in the research used for us, dual relationships total to 145 scores, making up to 17.39% of the sample group. It is the second most violated ethics in the field of counseling in the results. The reason behind established relationships other than professional and client, the reasons may vary. However, it can also be unavoidable reasons. For example, if the professional and the client live in the same community and are considered neighbors, those are unavoidable. Because of this, it is important for the professional to remember to maintain healthy boundaries at all times. Other reasons for dual relationships that are not intentional, that are not unintentional, which is intentional, falls under Standard 1's guide of not establishing sexual relationship with the client or the client's immediate family, be it current or former. The second category is confidentiality, subbed under breaking clients' confidentiality and keeping records. It can't be violated because under the same Code of Ethics Standard 2, confidentiality to clients states that practitioners are to keep confidential of any information between themselves and the clients at all times. The practitioner also has to disclose limits of confidentiality, obtain appropriate informed consent from the client, or if the client is unable to, from a legalized authorities that follow and meet the requirements. And also, the practitioners has to disclose about the client's access to their records, and also tell that the records are kept in top supervision. Fun fact about breaking confidentiality: it is often misunderstood as one of the biggest violations professionals make. However, most often than not, it is not. This happens due to certain circumstances, which includes but not limited to alerting the police authorities in case of hazardous situation, which means that it is allowed to break confidentiality if the client brings harm to themselves or harm to those around them and those involved. It was violated because although the research used to base this elaboration did not disclose whether it was within or outside the limitations, violating this code in the field totaled to 22 scores, up to 2.64 of the sample group. The result total the same with failed to keep records. Also, both are not in the top 5 categories of violation. And the third category, the last category, is professional competence, subbed under failure to meet continued education CE requirements. It can't be violated because it states that candidates of the counseling profession or in many other areas of any field are required to obtain a completed postgraduate degrees, be it master's, EDS, EDD, or PhD, and completed supervised clinical hours of practice or in training in which the full duration varies across employment by state laws or board of organizations. In the research, it states that this violation totaled to 358 scores, up to 50.12% of the sample group, as the most frequent, which means number 1, most violated codes for professional competence due to the fact that candidates did not complete the full duration of supervised clinical practice. Also, fun fact, the subprint for this states that they also don't have a postgraduate degree. Ultimately, this also leads to another breach of ethics, which is providing counseling to clients without proper license issued by an officially established board of organization pertaining to the field, which total 271 scores, up to 8.51 of the sample group in the cases. Moving on to part 2 of section C is the alternatives and resolutions. What can be done if a code is violated by a professional? As helping profession counselors are bound by codes of ethics and guidelines to ensure the safety of everyone involved. According to the Malaysian Psychotherapy Association, redo. Moving on to part 2 of section C, which is the alternatives and resolutions. What can be done if a professional violates a code of ethics? As a helping professions, counselors are bounded by codes of ethics and guidelines to ensure the safety of everyone involved. According to the Malaysian Psychotherapy Association, they have elaborated on what can be done if a professional breaks an ethic, whether on purpose or by accident, and these elaborations fall under resolving ethical issues. Several suggestion goes: A. Misuse of psychotherapy work. If a helping professional misuses, misinterprets, or misrepresents in media their work, they must take responsible steps to correct their mistakes as soon as possible so that the impact is reduced. B. Conflicts between ethics, laws and regulations, and organizational demands. If there is any sort of conflict between the said parties, then all parties involved are to clarify the nature of the conflict in attempts to solve them reasonably, which is sitting down and talking it out and seeing what else can be done in more depth. And lastly, C. Reporting ethical violations. If any helping professional sees another professional in their fields or maybe their colleagues violating an ethical code, should they inform higher authorities? This falls under Standard 1.04, which is informal resolutional ethical violation, and Standard 102, conflicts between law, regulations, and other governing authorities. That is all for our group's presentation. Thank you for watching. These are our references. Thank you.